Can you see my screen now? Just to double check. Okay, perfect. So good afternoon. Bonjour, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for 2021 National Postdoctoral Appreciation Week. My name is Edris Madadian, and I am the chair of the Canadian Association of Postdoctoral Scholars. We are very happy to celebrate this week with all our postdoctoral scholars and associations in Canada. Bienvenue tout le monde. Merci de vous rejoindre à nous pour la Semaine nationale d'appréciation postdoctorale 2021. Je m'appelle Edris Madadian et je suis président de l'Association canadienne de postdoctorantes et postdoctorants. Nous sommes très heureux de célébrer cette semaine avec tous nos postdoctorantes et postdoctorants et l'association au Canada. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that I am standing on the land that I'm standing on today is the land traditionally used by Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. We are all treaty people with a responsibility to honor all our relations. So welcome, everyone. The Canadian Association of Postdoctoral Scholars is a non-profit professional association that advocates on behalf of all Canadian postdoctoral scholars for a wide range of career paths. Established in 2009, the CAPS mandate is to improve the lives, training, and work experience for all Canadian postdocs. So this vision that guides this mandate is one of a strong community in which all Canadian postdocs are provided fair and reasonable compensation, benefits, rights, privileges, and protections, as well as a supportive social network and effective support, training, and career development opportunities. Currently, there are over 10,000 postdoctoral fellows living and working in Canada. Considering the diversity of its members, CAPS strives to facilitate the discussions on the challenges of the postdoctoral fellows with the relevant entities such as Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada and private and governmental funding agencies. Through conducting national survey, CAPS has been collecting the most updated information on Canadian postdocs, which helps to identify the gaps and lays the foundation for potential action plans. CAPS is strongly committed to connect to the postdoctoral associations in the Canadian universities and institutions, and endeavors to be the voice of all the Canadian postdocs inside and outside of Canada. So for the first day of National Postdoctoral Appreciation Week, we are thrilled to host postdoctoral associations from across Canada to discuss their experience about the rights of the postdocs and, of course, how to build the collective agreements and negotiate that with the universities. We thank you for accepting to take part in this initiative. This is very unique in the recent history of CAPS. And as you all know, the collective agreement can significantly help to support our postdocs. In fact, this bargaining is a process of negotiation between our universities and our the unions and associations aimed at agreements to regulate the working salaries, working conditions, benefits, and other aspects of compensations and rights for postdocs. So I'm very happy that we will start this week with such an important topic. The way that we have designed this session today is to hear from postdoc associations for almost 10 minutes. And then we wanted to make it more interactive. So it would be great if you let the speakers speak. And if you have any question at the end of their time, you can ask, or if you want, we have the time for the question and discussion that we can take advantage of that at the end of the session. Unfortunately, we received one regret. So one of our associations will not show up. So University of Alberta. So the timing will be shifted like 10 minutes earlier. And we are hoping to finish this session 10 minutes earlier as planned. For today, I'm pleased to introduce two of my colleagues who will join me to moderate this session. Let me introduce Dr. Dhruv Lavania, our Vice Chair membership at CAPS, and also Dr. Michelle Hebert, Vice President External at Postdoctoral Association at University of Calgary, and also the Director at Large representing PDAC at University of Calgary at CAPS. So last but not least, I want to acknowledge and appreciate all the efforts that our CAPS, a Postdoctoral Appreciation Week working group, has made during the past few months to get these sessions ready for this week. I would like to especially thank, on behalf of our CAPS group, to Dr. Christopher Enzetiegu and Dr. Dhruv Lavanya. So without any pause, I'm just giving the floor to Dr. Michelle Ebert to start the session. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Yes, hi. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are here in Canada. Very pleased to be here. Thank you, Edris, for the introduction. So as the VP External of the Postdoctoral Association of the University of Calgary and Director at Large at CAPS, I'm here to moderate the first session, and then I'll be stepping off at the end of the session. So I'd first like to introduce our two first speakers here. I don't know if I can see, if you turn your videos on. Yes, wonderful. I do see you. Wonderful. So Dr. Andrew Baudin and Kim Smith, two colleagues of mine that I'm thrilled to introduce to all of you. Dr. Baudin is a postdoctoral scholar and former president of the Postdoctoral Association of the University of Calgary, and Kim Smith is our executive director and labor relations officer of the Postdoctoral Association of the University of Calgary. I'm going to hand it right over to both of you to please introduce yourselves and share about your work and briefly how you came to achieving a collective agreement for the University of Calgary. On to you. Oh, and I do want to mention Dr. Baudin also was honored very recently with an award that you make a difference, and you absolutely both do. So welcome.
Thank you, Michelle, for that introduction. So I'm just going to share my screen. We'll start with this. So as Michelle had said, I'm a postdoctoral scholar at the University of Calgary, and I was a member of PDAC for a few years. I started off in communications position, and I was in the president position, and was the lead negotiator, I guess you'd call it, at the for the first collective agreement that we'll go over. And then, yeah. And Kim, do you want to introduce yourself before we move on?
Sure, yes. So through a connection and a very well-known labor relations person within Alberta, I was connected with Andrew, and we decided we began to work on the kind of the bones of the collective agreement together. I have worked with several post-secondary institutions, and I'm very, very honored to represent the Postdoctoral Fellows Association of the University of Calgary. So we are very excited about the collective agreement that we were able to ratify. And of course, as everybody knows, every collective agreement is a working document. So we're looking forward to hearing from other people as well.
Thanks, Kim. So to start, I'm just going to go back. I'm just going to go over some background that might be unique that many people might not be aware of for Alberta. So in Alberta, the academic relations is actually governed by a piece of legislation. So it's in addition to a Labor Relations Act. So it's all this legislation is called the Post-Secondary Learning Act, and it lays out who's a member of the unions and what unions are available or working at the university, each academic institute. So during a transition period from a conservative to an NDP government, some postdocs the postdoc unions at the three major universities in Alberta went and lobbied the new government to include postdocs in this legislation. And at that point, there was postdocs were not even recognized in the legislation at all. So what happened with that is they were successful. And on May 4th, 2017, Bill 7, this called an act to enhance the post-secondary academic bargaining, became a law. And it finally added postdocs into our provincial legislation that they should be recognized. So this was a huge step. So now that's meant that the universities had to deal with postdocs. They couldn't just brush us off anymore. They needed to deal with us, and they actually had to come into, we had to negotiate an agreement. So that was in 2017. So unfortunately, the universities had a year of adjustments and making adjustments on their own, because it wasn't until May 29th that the government of Alberta actually made PDAC the official bargaining unit for postdocs at the University of Calgary. So that was when PDAC became the legal bargaining unit, when we actually became the postdocs union. Shortly after that, legislation came out, or that government incorporation came out. Postdocs got an email from our past president, or the president at that time, informing us that we had been unionized. Unfortunately, because this was a government mandated unionization of postdocs, many were caught off guard. So hence the surprise. So that comes into one first key message. If you're gonna look to unionize, you have to get buy-in from your group. We spent the next year informing postdocs and at least of what happened, the history, and how we came into existence. So this was really important, because that was made the negotiations and buy-in on the eventual collective agreement much smoother and much better. But everybody got caught off surprise. And again, this is unique to Alberta, might be unique to Alberta, because postdocs didn't choose to unionize, they got unionized. The government unionized us based on input from previous postdocs and postdoctoral associations. So don't get me wrong, this was fantastic. This was the best thing that could happen to postdocs in Alberta in my mind. It just took some time, and we had to give it time. And luckily the university wasn't in a hurry to jump in and change anything, because they kind of had their way with postdocs for the last, however many years. So finally, in March 2019, the university actually reached out to us a week before we were going to send our letter of opening negotiations to them to start negotiations. It took from March to September of 2019 to negotiate the agreement that I'll go over the highlights soon. And it was all via Zoom. So I shouldn't say, these years have shifted a little bit. It's 2020, I apologize. It's March 2020 to September 2020 when the negotiations started. So it took a long time. It took about 14 sessions. Each session was about 2 to 3 hours long. But we got it done in October 2020. I don't know why I got the dates wrong. Too bad. Okay, so in October 2020, the postdocs ratified the collective agreement, and so did the Board of Governors. So I'm just going to highlight some of the main changes and some of the big things that we think that the postdocs gained in this agreement.
I think, Andrew, I'll just add a few things.
Yeah, for sure.
People might be interested in who sat at our table. Andrew as the president sitting at the table, and then myself as the labor relations officer. And my role as a labor relations officer is I am not employed by the university whatsoever. I am strictly employed by the faculty association. So there's no bias, there's no conflict of interest. And then we also had our advisor, who is Terry Sway. He has 30 years of negotiations, grievance arbitration experience. And then we also had our VP, that was external, right? Mohammed was external. And he's moved on to Ontario. So we thank him also for his contributions. But so it was the four of us that sat at the table. Myself, Andrew did the majority of the speaking. Myself, we kind of advised Andrew behind the scenes, just so that we were kind of more observing in the most of it, and Andrew's the one who was presenting the information, but we had a very strong team and was really grateful to work with those people. So I just wanted to add that quickly.
Yes, thank you, Kim. I had a takeaway at the end that to put a strong team together, and that is absolutely essential. And I didn't think I would be in that position as a negotiator. I didn't want it, but I took it, and I'm so happy that I did. It's a fantastic experience, and I think I'm really happy with what we received and we got out of this. And so first off, and I think this is a common thing across some universities, particularly in Canada, the appointments. The university had categorized postdocs into 3 different categories based on their funding. So one was the employee, which they were okay with. This is a postdoc that's paid by a PI salary or PI's research grant, or has an internally held award or whatever. But those of us who were funded by external grants, such as the CIHR or a Tri-Council grant, we lost benefits. So when I got my CIHR, I actually got kicked out of my health benefits, and I was told I was no longer an employee of the university, but rather I'm an associate. I'm a fellowship holder. So you have no rights at the university, but we want you to do all the work that we can under our name. So this was the big thing, is that right now in the appointments, we agreed to a clause that no postdoctoral associate, that is a postdoc who starts as an employee, will ever lose the benefits and rights guaranteed under this collective agreement. There's some hoops to jump through with that the university had to work through, but this clause alone took the entire time. It opened in the first session with the definition of a postdoc. It didn't close until probably the second or the very last negotiation meeting. So that is a huge thing for us, is that we now no postdoc will ever lose the protections once they are a member of PDAC. Hours of work, as we know, we all work more than the regular work hours, but we've had a clause entered into it that agreed upon that nobody should be disciplined for working less than 50 hours a week, right? I mean, it's your choice if you work more, but you cannot be penalized for working less than 50 hours a week. Compensation, they didn't budge. Universities do not want to pay us anything more than the bare minimum that they require. And unfortunately, that's usually based on the Tri-Council's funding. So at University of Calgary, that's 40,000. We asked for 50, they laughed at us. So I'm just going to leave it at that. We asked for a realistic based on our education and training to start at 50, and not even close. One of the big things that we got was leaves. So leaves are all still negotiable, but we start at 20, is it 20 Ds now? Oh, sorry, leaves. Sorry, this is not something. Leaves, again, this costs the university money. And they didn't want to have us they didn't want to provide us the same clause as every other single unionized member group there at the university had. But what they did offer us was something called this casual illness leave. So what it said is that you can take up to 5 consecutive work days off due to injury or illness without any loss of income or benefit. And there's actually no limit. They didn't put a limit on this. This was a huge one. They didn't put a limit on to us as long as we return to work for at least 1 day after 5 days of being off. So if you're able to take off 5 days of work, you come back for 1 day, you work your full day hopefully you can, and then you can go back off on another 5 days of casual illness. And that can be used indefinitely as long as you return with 1 day. That was their way to get off, because they didn't want to give us any long-term disability extensions or payments. The next one was a massive, huge maternity and parental leave. I'll just leave it up. You can go grab the collective agreement off our website, but that was huge. Postdocs never had any paternity or parental leave top-ups at all. And now they do for at least the first 18 weeks of their leave. Terminations we negotiated as well. There's finally a formalized grievance and mediation and arbitration clause for postdocs, because up until then, there was no formal process that postdocs could grieve any disciplinary action or anything. It was like we were at the whim of our PI and the university and whoever was in the VPR research, the vice president of research, what they did with us. We also were happy that the university was open to be including an academic freedom clause, as long in the only stipulation that they had was that it was under the purview of our postdoctoral duties. And that was it. Everything, the whole clause is essentially taken from our faculty association, except with the one sentence that it does have to abide by our postdoctoral association or our postdoc contract that we signed, which is pretty reasonable, that we're not going to take our PI's money and do what we want because it's not our money. The rights, and then finally, term. We agreed 3 years because this was a good duration. It gives us 2 years of trying out the agreement, because most likely we'll be starting to negotiate in the last year of the term, so that we can agree on a new extension. So, but again, the university always wants longer, and they kept hitting us. They kept asking us, I shouldn't say hitting us because that's a bad term. They kept asking us to guarantee that, hey, if we give you this, will you be up for a 5-year term? And that brings me to my, the last kind of section with takeaways. And actually that brings us to my last point. You do not agree. And Terry and Kim kept hammering it home to me. You never agree to the terms of the contract if you're negotiating until the very end and you're happy with what you got. And then you can agree to it. But every time they asked, it was, well, let's just keep negotiating, because if you're up for agreeing to some of our terms and we get what we would like, most of the things that we would like, then the term goes up. If you don't, well, the term goes down. So it can range from single year to 3 years. I wouldn't personally go past 3 years, and according to Kim and can speak to this too, but that's a fantastic term. So, but in general, takeaways. We initially had to get input from other groups on campus. That was essential. Talk to your faculty association. A lot of them are going to be useful or helpful and want to see you provide, because they're just to their faculty that you would want to provide to postdocs. Look for experienced individuals on your negotiation team. It was fantastic and absolute necessity, and I cannot emphasize it enough that we would not have gotten the contract that we did without individuals like Kim and the Terry, who she mentioned earlier. No doubt about it. Do not rush the negotiations. Take your time. Make sure you talk to each, you will get what you can. There's no rush. Some people think there is. The university usually is rushing. Mm-hmm. You don't have to. You have to agree to everything before they sign off on a clause. Take your time. What I found out, universities are very, very afraid of the tri-council policies. They do not ever want to contravene tri-council policies. That was our hiccup with the definitions of a postdoc and who is covered by this collective agreement. Remember that the negotiations are usually collegial, but you need to remain firm on the important articles that you have. Again, there's going to be some what we have termed throwaway articles where you're like, we'll let you have that one because, okay, we'll make you feel, you can have that one, but we want this one, right? So, and so those are kind of the main takeaways that I got out of the negotiations. And Kim, please add, yeah.
I think I would just add two things. One thing, when it came to the employee definitions, we did seek legal counsel. We did review the labor code, and they just would not budge. No matter how you broke it down for them based on employment standards and the Canadian labor code, they would not budge. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, yes, do not rush. It took us 14 sessions. Each session was approximately an hour and a half. And then we also met an hour and a half prior to that to go over what we were going to present. And then we had to meet, to confirm, yes, we'll move forward with what they presented. And the exchange of information that we presented was basically, I think, Andrew, if I remember correctly, we presented it just the articles at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then right at the very front, we did present the entire collective agreement put together, if I remember correctly. I can't remember.
Yeah, we gave them an outline of all the articles that we would want to negotiate. So for the first agreement, we said, here are the 30 articles that we want to negotiate. They had 10.
Yeah.
They only had 10 or 11. Like, it was very minimal. They wanted a bare bones contract. And we said, no, 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 no. This isn't going to be what we want. So, and I should say, in the case of Alberta, I know we're getting late. With the employee definition, we could, yes, we still disagree with their definition of employees, because in our legislation that we talked about, postdocs are labeled as employees of the university, regardless of where your money comes from. So what we had to do was think about what's better for the bulk of our membership. So we had 500, let's say 500 postdocs, another on being paid by their PI, another 50 based on from the external funding like Tri-Council.
Mm-hmm.
We made the decision that we didn't, we weren't going to delay this to look for legal, to challenge the university's interpretation, because it what they proposed covered the vast majority. So with that, I know we took too much time and I apologize, but it was really exciting to be part of this first negotiations and to get this first collective bargaining agreement in place in Alberta.
Yes.
So,
and I'm going to put my email address into the chat if anybody has any additional questions and they'd like to reach out. I love this stuff.
I will do the same.
Happy to help. So yes, thank you so much for having us. I really
thank you very much, Idris and Caps. Really appreciate this time.
Thank you, Michelle, too.
And Michelle, yes.
It's a pleasure. No, and please don't apologize. The comments in the chat are a reflection of how instrumental this information is. There is a question from Dr. Emma Griffiths. She says, this is information. Thank you so much. Do you have any advice about putting together a negotiation team, people with certain skills, experience, etc.? Often PDFAs have to rely on volunteers, as you both were, and folks, and it's, critical. We need folks that she's saying with critical negotiation skills, right? And they're hard to come by.
I can tell you. Oh,
okay, sorry. And I think the first thing I would say is I was not a volunteer, although I did volunteer an entire year. I was very committed to the project, and I understood the time it was going to take. So I worked for free for a year, but I was not volunteer. I eventually, once we started to collect our dues, was compensated.
Thank you for correcting me. That's true. But you did work for free, right? Like there was a trust that this was going to go through. Yes, good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and to tell you the truth, this is where I'm looking to get help from other members and unionized groups on your team. Like we had a meeting with the faculty association executive director, and she put me in contact with a colleague who ended up sitting at our table for the entire time. He was Terry Sway. Phenomenal. It was an immense, it was just the best piece of advice that we could have given, and it came from one of the other unions. So this is where look for the experience in them and get the input and maybe feedback. We chatted with Terry for over a year, a few times over the year leading up to this, and then he put us into contact with Kim because she was local and she could sit at our negotiation table in person, whereas Terry is about 3 hours away in Edmonton and would not be able to sit at the table in person. That became moot when we did everything over Zoom because of COVID.
Yes.
But it was the best piece of advice still that we could put Kim. We, met with Kim, explained the situation, said, you know what, this is where we are. We have no money. We have a bunch of poorly paid postdocs right now. And this is what we're trying to do. Would this be something that you're interested in? And I don't know how or why, but she agreed to it. And she said, yeah, no, you know what? I'm willing to work for free. and we'll get this done, and then we'll sign a contract. I'll keep track of my hours, and you pay me as soon as we start getting dues, or you guys start getting dues. And that's exactly what we did. Without that, and without her trust and belief in us, that it wouldn't have happened. So really, really important. Talk to those people that are unionized on your team or at your group, because most of them are willing to help you because they don't want to see, they're all in this to look after each other.
Yeah. And before we answer that one question, I'll just say I am now employed by the Faculty Association. I work 15 hours a week.
Sorry,
anyway,
PDAC.
PDAC, sorry. PDAC,
Yeah,
sorry. PDAC.
She is employed, yeah.
Sorry, by the PDAC group, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, did we want to answer another question here? I know time is ticking.
We do have a raised hand here, Dr. Villemeke. And Villemeke, I'm not going to even try to pronounce your last name, but Hoeven, I think. Please, I think you have a comment or a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly comment on the duration of the negotiations here in Montreal. It was 2 years to go from the first to the second. So I think your choice of going for 3 years is wonderful to figure out how it works, if it all works as you would like it to be. But then we actually went for a longer term, because during the time of the negotiations, when things like salary increase or compensation for inflation were all put on hold. So 2 years in a postdoc contract is a very long time to not receive increases that you might rely on, right? So I agree with the idea of not to rush, but from our side at one point, we had to get to an agreement one way or the other, because too many postdocs were also having the negative effects of this duration.
Yeah, I think in that situation, that might be again, because this is the first one, our first one. No postdocs postdocs were being impacted, but nothing that it was outside of what was happening before. So this is where we wanted to make sure we got this right. And it just, but completely agree. I think the next one, I hope Kim, Michelle, you don't take offense, but I'm kind of glad I'm not going to be at the negotiation table. I think those repeats and the renewal of the agreement are going to be a little bit harder, because now each side has had a chance to say oh, this really works, but this really does not work. And then again, you got to have both sides agree to any changes, right? So I think that's the hardest part. In salary, that is the biggest hurdle. And we kept, just so everybody on the line knows, we kept getting thrown back at us that University of Calgary at 40,000, a minimum of 40,000, that's the highest in Canada. That's how, poorly paid and appreciated, I think, postdoc work and postdocs in general are thought of. Mm-hmm. That just highlights it, and they were not willing to budge at all.
No.
So
our time is up. I can't thank you both enough for sharing your experience, sharing the process, giving the rest of Canada some ideas about takeaways, very specific examples of challenges that you overcame. And Kim, thank you for sharing your email in the chat. Please do reach out. Kim is very, very approachable and so knowledgeable. And Andrew, again, always a pleasure. So on to the next one, Edris. Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for sharing your email as well. Okay. Cheers, everybody. Enjoy today.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you very much to both of our speakers from University of Calgary. It was extremely informative, and I'm really excited for this session today. Without any pause, I'm gonna introduce our next speakers from Western Universities. I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Stephen Tops. Excuse me, Dr. Stephen Tops, the president of the Postdoctoral Association at Western University, and Dr. Antoine Cornprost, vice president external at Association at Western University. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I would really appreciate if we stick to the time, and then of course, I mean, this discussion is super interesting for all of us, and I'm sure that there is a lot of questions that I'm gonna ask. So we do have time at the end, so we make sure that our speakers are taking their time, and then to continue there. But thank you again, and the floor is yours, Dr. Pops and Dr. Gunpops.
Thank you very much. Yes, so hello everyone. So we're a little bit unusual at Western University in that we have two organizations that represent postdocs on campus. Antoine and I both come from the association, and we're actually a university administration organized advocacy group. And we also have PSAC 610, which represents the graduate teaching assistants and postdocs on campus. Unfortunately, no one from the local union was able to join us today to outline their experiences of negotiating our recent collective agreement. We'll give Antoine and I will give you an idea of what we've experienced through negotiations of our agreements as associate members of the union. So Western has had postdocs unionized for over 6 years now. We've gone through 3 collective agreements in total. Or we've just started our 3rd collective agreement, that is. And we have the two types of postdocs on campus that Andrew and Kim were talking about, where Calgary seems to differ from where you were able to successfully get all postdocs classified under the employee bracket. We still have postdoctoral associates like myself and Antoine who are considered employees by the university, and fellows are considered external contractors by the university. So they're covered by it differently, and they're not covered by the collective agreement. So that was what came about at the first time. So I'll also back up Andrew on how the postdocs were informed about this, and this took a long time and delayed a lot of the movement within collective agreements. But we're on our 3rd collective agreement now, and I'm going to invite Antoine, who's just going to highlight some of the important aspects of our current collective agreement. And I think actually the union should be applauded for their work on this. They've got to a point where we're still not there in terms of salaries, but some of the benefits that we're now enjoying at Western are very good. So I'll invite Antoine to share that.
Yeah, so I will share my screen. I will highlight some of the benefits in our.
Yep, I think that you're enabled. You can share your screen unless.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
It works. Yeah. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here. My name is Antoine Gunpops. I am the VP External at the Postdoctoral Association at Western. And our collective agreement was, as Steve said, was negotiated between the University of Western Ontario and the PSAC, the Public Service Alliance of Canada. It was a local 640 Unit 2. And it is established for the period between January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2022. There are 34 articles, and the first paragraph of the first article highlights the general philosophy of the agreement is to establish an orderly collective bargaining relationship between the university and its employees, and to encourage efficiency of operation, prompt on peaceful resolution of disputes, and set forth an agreement covering rates of pay and other working conditions. So one of the main highlights of the plan of the agreement is the health plan. So this is the first year, I think, that we have this. I mean, I have been a postdoc for 2 years. This is the first year that we have this, and it is very convenient. It includes an extended health and dental plan provided by Manulife. It is a very standard, I think, health plan with prescription drugs covered up to 80% co-insurance. Oh, no, it is not 25,000. So it would be wonderful, but there is it 25,000? I don't know. Anyway, there is a maximum covered per person. It seems a bit high to me, but maybe I made a typo. I don't know.
I think that's accurate. I think you can. Yeah. I think that's accurate. But...
Okay. So up to a maximum of 25,000 per year per covered person. It covers also paramedical services like and up to 80% co-insurance on a maximum of $500 per covered person per year. Vision care, 100% reimbursement with a maximum of $150 over 24 months. Dental care, both basic and preventive, 80% reimbursement for basic and preventive, and 50% reimbursement for major like bridges or dentures and things like that. And there's a combined maximum of $1,200 per year per covered person. Next come the professional expenses. Employees are reimbursed for their travel expenses according to the university travel policy. They are also reimbursed for fees on or passes for access to research environments and equipments as approved by each of the postdoc supervisor. We also have a $50 per month credit for professional expenses. And this is new because on my first year as a postdoc, we had flex credits that we could decide to allocate either to health expenses or professional expenses. But with this new collective agreement, we have the health plan and the $50 allowance for professional expenses. Employees have to be reimbursed for personal protective equipment or specialized clothing for working in labs or research environments, and employees are provided with a computer and free connection to the internet and use of the university's computer system. And we have a minimum salary, which unfortunately is much lower than in Calgary, but that's okay. But it is set to increase over the years. The minimum was 35,000 35,425 on January 1st, 2020, 35,942 on January 1st, 2021, and on January 1st, 2022, it would be 35,466. Here is some of the highlights of the plan. Like Steve said, I was not anyway involved in its negotiation, but the union was. But I think it's a very convenient plan, and I thank you all for your attention.
So yeah, just a few things to follow up on there. So this current collective agreement was challenges to increase base salaries within the university, and universities seem very difficult to move on this. So we as a separate organization from the union are also putting pressure in terms of increasing trying to promote the value of postdocs and encouraging the universities to increase the base salary. Although the same excuse we keep coming back to us is it's due to the tri-councils not increasing their floors. And they're also very vulnerable to social media pressure. One of the reasons the health plan was leveraged so successfully for in this collective agreement is there was actually, and it was an independent Twitter pressure on social media from one of the associates of the university who couldn't pay for their insulin. So because they were type 1 diabetic. So these kinds of things were very helpful, I think, for the union to be able to get some of the concessions that were available in this collective agreement. These did not exist, as Antoine said. We had flex credits prior to this agreement, which meant that if you wanted to go to a conference, you may not be able to go to the dentist. So, and these are the kind of arguments that finally the university was being able to leveraged on. So that's some of our experiences. Unfortunately, we can't give you all the details that the union would be able to, but we're happy to take any questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Toffman, Dr. Gunpops. It's very interesting to hear about the collective agreement at Western. So we received one question from in the chat, and also I think that I saw a hand. It's gone. I'm not sure if I'm missing that. but let's start from the question in the chat. We received the question from Dr. Emma Griffith. Yeah, if you can, are you reading that, or you want me to read that?
Oh, you can go ahead and read it.
Sorry, Emma, you just go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, I just popped it in the chat because one, I didn't forget, but I don't mind if someone else, reads these out. But thank you so much for this presentation. It's really, really helpful. I guess my questions are directed to you both, but also to everybody else who's in a position of negotiating authority on the call. I'm really interested in who has authority to negotiate with the university on behalf of postdocs. I had the impression that it had to be the union, but maybe that's not always the case. I was hoping someone could speak to that. And then I have a second question, but maybe we'll tackle the first one first.
Yeah, in our situation, it's the union that has the authority to negotiate. The union will elect the bargaining team, and they negotiate on behalf of postdocs at Western.
Right. Okay. So you have to go through the whole rigmarole of unionizing.
Well, can I hop in for a second?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
Emma. At UFC, so yeah, right now that we're unionized, I think that's you should go through the union. Before PDAC was unionized, PDAC still existed, but it was an informal gathering that was created to look out for postdocs and discuss issues with the university's higher positions, right?
Right.
This is what pushed a few postdocs over the edge before, is that they would discuss issues, but they weren't acknowledged.
Right.
Because it's an technically it's an informal association that was there to look after and talk to the university about postdocs issues, but they weren't legally required to listen to them.
Right.
So they did get pushed away, and that's what I would not be like. I mean, some universities, don't get me wrong, that's what the experience at UFC that led into some of the lobbying the government, but that's not at every university. Some institutes, the administration is fantastic. U of A's administration has been, as what I've heard, has actually had a good working relationship with their informal postdoc association. They would listen to them, but I think some issues just got brushed aside from others that got pushed the entire group over the edge a few years earlier before we got unionized.
Right. So I'm sorry I don't mean to, hog the conversation. This is just so critical and so interesting. So when you all, including, Western and everyone else, when you were in the process of unionizing, were you approached by, well, I guess at Western, you're part of a larger union, right? Is that right? It's not union just for postdocs.
Yeah, it's the GTAs are in that group as well.
Right.
So that's the Unit 1, Unit 2. Unit 1's the GTAs, we're Unit 2.
Right. So I'm just wondering, because we've had, CUPE there, I think sort of the similar situation at SFU approached us a few years ago about joining, and that's the lecturers and I think the grad students as well. It's just sometimes and it's not that often, but sometimes the issues are sort of conflicting. What's good for the lecturers is not good for the postdocs and vice versa. So, sometimes there are conflicts of interest, but joining something that's already established might be easier than, going through the whole process of unionizing postdocs. So, I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, neither Antoine or I were around when the unionization occurred, so I can't give you the exact experience. But I think PSAC 610 was already on campus for the GTAs, so that's why the postdocs were approached in that situation.
And I think Andrew can speak more to this. TUCFA, which is the faculty association for the university, did approach our group and wanted to represent us. But yes, again, there's conflict of interest there, because when we have, like, the very first project I did was an investigation against a PI and one of our members, that becomes an issue. Which side did they take and whose side did they take? And so it was more beneficial for us to be separate from them. Now we work, like, I speak to Sheila, who's over there all the time, and we work together on several things, but there are times where the very first project I did was an investigation and it was a PI against a member.
And the other thing that I have to mention is that Alberta is unique. The unions working at the university have to be included in this post-secondary learning act. So even though, I mean, I'm sure we probably could, I'm not sure how the exact legal implications would have come about, but that's why postdocs were never recognized until we got put into this legislation. So even though TACFA could have came to postdocs and said, hey, you guys are academics, we, you know, I think we could represent you. They never did, because it's always based on who the representation is based on who's in that legislation. So that's, I think, is unique to Alberta. And that's why that's why they had to lobby the government to get us included.
Right.
Once we were included, then, well, that's a whole other story where TACFA did not, I will say, the faculty association at the time did not think we should be under our own union,
Right.
but that we rather should follow under them as academics. But the individuals lobbying the groups at the Postdoc Association presidents at that time really fought hard against it, because exactly what Kim said. In my mind too, it's still a conflict of interest unless you have, because who are they going to support?
Yeah.
You know, the postdoc or their PI.
Right.
This is very interesting. I'm sorry to jump in and cut you off, but we are running a little bit of time. So let's leave the rest of the conversation for the end of the discussion. But thank you very much again, Dr. Top and Dr. Gunpops from Western University. So having that said, I'll hand the microphone over to Michelle for introducing their next speakers.
Edris, did you want me to introduce the next ones?
Yes, please.
Oh.
Or if you want me, I can do it.
That would be great if you could do it.
Definitely.
Yes,
yeah.
I didn't realize that. So I'm jumping into another meeting, actually.
Oh, yes, no, for sure. All right, so I am pleased to introduce our next speakers from Dalhousie University Postdoctoral Society, Dr. Matthew Stoic, the president of Dalhousie Postdoctoral Society, and also Dr. Wesley Putty from Dalhousie Postdoctoral Fellows Union. I am not sure if Dr. Putty is here today, but thank you very much, Dr. Stoic, for showing up, and the floor is yours.
No, actually, so that will be part of what I cover in the next bit. I'm just trying to see if my screen will let me share. If it will let me share. And hopefully you're seeing something now.
Yeah.
It's just coming up. Okay, perfect. As was just brought up, I'm going to be a singular person here, but I wanted to put this up first just to acknowledge the fact that I'm a number of people kind of behind the scenes and behind me doing a lot of work. It's a relatively small committee here at Dalhousie. Unfortunately, it's become even smaller this year, as is the nature of postdocs. A number of our executive committee got jobs and gainful employment both within academia and outside, and we're kind of a little shrunk down now. The biggest one of those that I'd like to point out is Wesley, who was the Postdoctoral Society Union representative, and basically he was very instrumental in liaising with the Public Service Alliance and the union as we kind of progressed. So to give you a bit of a background on DPS as a whole, it's a bit of a complicated picture here. It's a very small university in the grand scheme of things, but the Postdoctoral Society here actually, as of January of this year, represents all of the postdocs at universities within Nova Scotia. So right now, most of our members are actually from Dalhousie. Best guess estimates right now are about 150 to 200 postdocs here at Dalhousie, as well as members from St. Mary's, University of St. Anne, and Mount St. Vincent. We also have reached out and have ongoing contact with St. FX and Cape Breton University to keep them involved and to kind of provide a community and support system for them. That being said, the union as such here for postdocs is strictly limited to Dalhousie as far as I know. And getting to that, the slide here is intentionally very, very barren, which is going to kind of be the motivation behind what I'm about to say, which is a little different than others have said. We've had at Dal, I believe we're going into our third collective bargaining right now, which is due up at the end of this year. Unfortunately, due to the nature of our society, we've also had a number of transient kind of members of the committee, members of the union, and on both sides, there's been a number of changes, and not a lot of them have been overlapping. So admittedly, I know perhaps an embarrassingly little amount of what the intricacies of the system are. And unfortunately, that was kind of because of the events of COVID during the last year, and kind of an isolation and fragmentation of our society because of that, as well as the fact that the way, when I became president in January, it was instructed that by our constitution that only every executive committee member could only hold one position. So as president, I was supposed to stay at a somewhat of an arm's length to the union rep. The union rep had to be someone different than myself. Unfortunately, that did create some communications breakdowns. And as we're entering the newest round of collective bargaining, we do have a lot of the benefits that have been brought up by Andrew and others here. The exact specifics of which I can't really say right now, and are inevitably going to be changing in the coming months. However, we've kind of also been a part of the problems that was really brought forward by Andrew, is that we're two streams here. As soon as, if you came in as a postdoctoral scholar and had your own external funding, you never got benefits, or you lost benefits as soon as you kind of, congratulations, you've got your own funding, you don't have dental anymore. What I've been hearing is that they have now voted to become a union, or I'm not sure if they're going to become their own, if they're going to become part of the greater, or how that's going to evolve. That's a very recent thing with the postdoctoral scholars as opposed to the postdoctoral employees. But really, it's even that has become unfortunately become a process for us, in that a lot of kind of the fragmentation and lack of communications breakdown of the last year have become evident as collective bargaining has kind of begun here. And I've heard, as the society, we're hearing from some of the members saying, oh, okay, well, I got an email to be part of this collective bargaining group. Has anybody else gotten this? What am I getting? Why am I not getting these things? And as a society, we're not getting the same emails, or I may be getting it as a postdoc, but the society's not getting it. So we're kind of in a spot now where Wesley left, who was just starting to make a lot of contacts with the union, reestablished those, to the point that, and probably through nobody's fault other than the breakdown of communication, when Wesley first reached out earlier this summer to the Public Service Alliance, the contact he had actually had our chapter listed as an inactive chapter. So we were all part of a union, but maybe not part of a union. So we're kind of working now and going to try to take from others, I guess, is how do we increase this communication? How can we create a sense of redundancy within this so that we don't encounter this, especially coming up to points like this right now, where the scholars are potentially entering a collective bargaining period. The postdoctoral employees are entering a period of the same. And are we going for the same things? Are we different unions? Or what's going to happen? Are we going to, is it a case that we can actually get to a point where everybody is getting, like what was said with PDAC, of saying, once you get this level of benefits and protection, you don't lose it, and everybody who is a postdoc and should be getting treated the same. So for us, I'm unfortunately not able to speak to a lot of the intricacies of this, and but from a personal experience, I can say this is like something that we're working on now, and is maybe a cautionary tale for others of saying like this can happen type thing, and how do we avoid it? And with that, I'll finish there.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, it's interesting. Is there any question from Dr. Stoic and the DPS at Dalhousie?
Can I just hop in? Sorry.
Yes.
Can you mind? Dr. Stoic, this is, I mean, we used Dalhousie's collective agreement, but just to clarify with ours, I might not have made it clear. There's actually, we have 3 streams of postdocs at the University of Calgary, but the postdoctoral associate, the employee, so they come in and they start off being paid by a PI's grant or a university funded stipend salary. The postdoctoral fellowship holder, so right now, so if you start as an associate, what we've got built in is if you start as an associate, if you get external funding, some like a CIHR, you actually now get appointed into 2 positions. You keep your associate, but it'll be at least, it's a top up. It's essentially considered a top up of a minimum of 5% of their preceding salary, right? And then you get your associate, and then you get your fellowship position as well. So that is how, and I'm going to give university credit where credit's due, because it was their idea that this is what they could do. And this is why it took them, they had to negotiate with their health benefit funder. So in saying, what's the bare minimum that a postdoc could pay to keep their benefits, it's Plan C benefits. That is what it came out to be. So they said, okay, if you're paying, if you're getting $40,000 a year and then you get a CIHR grant, you get your 40,000 CIHR, and your PI now has to still pay you at least 5% of that original 40,000. Hopefully it's a lot more, don't get me wrong, but that was the bare minimum that the university would have applied. So, and that goes for individuals like NSERC scholars as well. But the hitch here is that if a postdoc brings their own money to start, and therefore never enters into an employee category with the university, then they will never be part of PDAC, or they won't be part of PDAC until they get paid by their PI. So what we're telling, and hopefully PDAC is saying, is that if new posts come in, get your employer, get your PI to pay you 1 month salary. 1 month gets you into PDAC because you're paid by that, right? And then get your fellowship to start. So when we were bringing in the negotiation, when the agreement started, that they accepted, okay, somebody had just gotten CIHR and they deferred the start till January 1st of 2021 when our collective agreement started. They were in PDAC, right? Because they were an employee and then they started in the play. So there's still, and this is where we had to play around, and we still think we have a case at our labor relations board where, because we're part of the legislation, we think that this shouldn't be the case. But they're saying is like, this clause covers 95% of postdocs at the University of Calgary, and hopefully even a small and a larger portion going forward. So, but I'm more than happy to chat about this offline too.
Yeah.
That's kind of to clarify our clause, but yeah, that was the university's idea, because I don't know if your university is funding it, but we dropped from 75 CIHR externally funded postdocs 1 year to 40 the next, once they included this, like, well, you got a fellowship, you're out of there. You don't have benefits or anything. People were declining it.
And it's interesting here, and I don't know how widespread it is, but it's the unfortunate thing with Dalhousie is there's no one way to track people coming in to know who is starting, or to get them information in a timely manner as they start. Like even at this point, if I was to go to the university, which we have, and again, I'm hoping I'm getting most of what I'm saying right. We are still waiting for clarification on it. But if I was to go to the university to say, okay, we're trying to contact or get contact out to these people, Dalhousie, for all intents and purposes, has told us we have no idea how many stocks we have. We have no early, and this is something else we're putting in, is trying to work with Dal as a whole, is to say, okay, during the onboarding process, everyone who's getting considered for this position should be given this pamphlet to say, okay, here's our contacts, here's this. And it's been a matter of reluctance even to come to that. And again, I've had some minimal contact going back and forth with the union, and maybe thing they can do. Unfortunately, that's an evolving situation. So
unfortunate. I mean, we've got it like that. Yeah, they have to provide this information and everything at the onset and on the onboarding. Like, here's your union, here's this, here's your contact information, away you go. So
wonderful. Yeah. Thank you very much. I know that there is another question. If that is okay, we are leaving the questions for the end. I know that we are running out of time and we have a little bit of, we were supposed to at least like 4 more speakers. So I apologize to get more questions at this point, and let's leave it for the end if that is fine. So having that said, I'll just hand the mic to Dr. Drew Lavania, my colleague, to introduce our next speaker. Drew?
Yep. Thank you, Idris. All right, a big thank you to all our speakers so far. I am pleased to introduce our very own, our next speaker, Dr. Willemike Kouwenhoven from University of Montreal. Dr. Kouwenhoven was the former negotiator of collective agreement at UDEM, and she's now the VC Francophone representative at CAPS. So over to you, Willemike.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? All right, perfect. Yeah. Here we go. Yes. So I'll just introduce our union first. We are CEREM, the Syndicat des Employés de la Recherche de l'Université de Montréal. And in this union, we have 3 different units. I think it's similar to other people's description, but for us, it means research professionals, research support staff, and postdocs. The union itself existed already since 2009, and the postdocs joined, as this was also already discussed previously, in 2014. So we could rely, I wasn't there, but I do know there was a lot of infrastructure to rely on at that point. I'll be presenting here as the former postdoc representative, because I was the one participating in all the negotiations. All right, so the separation that we just discussed before about people receiving a fellowship and receiving a salary is also something that is appropriate to the University of Montreal. In our case, we can only represent the people that receive salary from their professor. So I really like the clause that was discussed earlier about enabling postdocs that started out as an employee to keep their benefits. At this point, this is not an option yet at the University of Montreal. For us, the cutoff, however, is if you receive a fellowship that represents 75% of your salary or less, you can still be unionized. So that requires some negotiation potentially with your PI to see if you can, both get a raise and the benefits. At this point, the union represents about 200 postdocs. It has remained quite stable over the years, even during COVID. And the majority of the postdocs are international. Am I supposed to do anything with the people that are, or is somebody else doing that?
Okay. We'll look after that. We'll look after that.
All right. So our first collective agreement was signed in 2016, and I mentioned before, only lasted 3 years. And starting February 2019, it finished, and we had to negotiate. And as I mentioned, we negotiated for 2 years. It was a long process. With the help of questionnaires and AGMs, we created a list of demands, and we set up a committee of people who wanted to be involved. Our top demands are represented here in these posters that we used as a part of our campaign. We really wanted to improve the standing of postdocs, the way that they were viewed at the university. Healthcare was a very big issue because especially international postdocs were not covered by the provincial plan, which was initially thought when they finished their first collective agreement. So there's this huge gap of health insurance for the majority of our postdocs. We also wanted to increase the number of sick days and paid sick days, and increase of salary, obviously. And another thing that we wanted to achieve was that PIs would be responsible for paying, for example, your computer. So yeah, I mentioned this before, but it was a long process and it was difficult. I will explain some items that were creating this difficulty. First of all, the university was very aware of the position of power. And any other types of negotiations, employees have a power where they can say, look, we don't take this anymore, we're going to strike. This, of course, was never an option in our group. It was already very hard to rally people to get postdocs motivated to participate in this process, to participate in campaigning, because postdocs are busy people. We all know this, and they have their own research. They have oftentimes young families. There's a lot of things that they have to be involved in. They have temporary contracts, so it's difficult to share your time if you have only a year and a half to prove yourself. People are international but don't maybe feel a responsibility to participate in the system where they are at that moment. So it's difficult, and the university knew that, and they took advantage of that. And one of the things that happened often is we set up a few dates for meetings, and then they got canceled at the very last minute, and then they would only be available 2 months later. So that took a lot of our time and worked against us. And as I mentioned, this was in the benefit of the university, because salaries were frozen, and even though it was a small increase of salary, these were all no longer taking place. So that was a difficult situation, and 2 years is a long time if your average contract is also about 2 years. The other strategy that the university used was trying to minimize the position of the postdoc. In French, the word that was oftentimes used was stagiaire for the postdoc, and which roughly translates as student. And so they would use that as a way to say, no, you're not really employees, you're stagiaire. You're here to learn, you're here to train. So this is an investment in yourself. So we're not gonna add many benefits because this is already training to you. In addition, you're going to be here only temporarily, and we don't offer any benefits to our temporary employees either. So they really try to set us apart in that way, while we were trying to show, no, we are employees like anybody else, and therefore have the right for benefits. The strategy that we tried to achieve, the strategy that we used to try to achieve more results were not only motivate postdocs in our own community, but also extend to, for example, CAPS, reach out to CAPS to get more people involved. We tried to reach out to PhD students. I presented at different conferences, for example, because these are the people that will become a postdoc. And these are the people that know how important postdocs are. So we asked for letters of support from them and from professors, for example. We tried to do a campaigning, but we were stuck there in the middle of COVID, so there was nothing much happening on campus itself. But we made some posters and shared this on social media. Started a hashtag. Which with moderate success, I would say. We created masks with our logo and sent this out to all our members. And asked them to take a picture of them wearing the mask and sharing the cause, which was actually quite successful, which was very fun to do. And something that I think helped us a lot is that we reached out to provincial politicians. And here we have a picture of Alexandre Leduc, who wore our mask at his place of work, and so supported our search for better benefits for postdocs. And the second picture here I share is even with his party leader, and this was a post shared yesterday. So this was a gift apparently that lasted. So we're very happy with that. And finally, I think one approach that helped us a lot is we requested a mediator for our negotiation process. And this was recommended by our professional negotiator from FPC. And that was a very good move, because especially the tactic, the stalling tactic that the university used, that was sort of, they were called on that. They were now held accountable for the commitments that they made. And I can highly recommend requesting a mediator in the process if you feel like the process itself isn't even being respected. Let's see. So yes, in the end, we did come to an agreement, and I would say it's really an agreement where we won some and we lost some. We were able to change the name to remove the word stagiaire from the agreement, which helped us, I think, a lot in the way postdocs are being viewed and will be viewed in the future. We have obtained health insurance, which is absolutely a huge win, again, because there was nothing available, not even private insurance available to international postdocs here in Quebec due to the way the laws were created. And we did get an increase in rates. Again, we're also not as high as Alberta, but we hit the 36,000 somewhat as a minimum. So it was a step up from where we were. But we left some items here to be negotiated for the next team. And as I mentioned, we agreed in the end to 5. I think they wanted to go to 7. But 5 allows us to also see if the system, if the agreement works, and allows, if you avoids a little bit having that gap of 2 years every time that you need to negotiate a new agreement. So I want to finish with some of the advice and some of the lessons learned that we had. So this is more an advice really for Francophone universities, but early on in the process, well, relatively early on in the process, we were able to agree that we would remove the word stagiaire. And that was for them actually an easy one to give, because it doesn't cost anything. But it does, in the end, it undermined their argument of trying to keep postdocs down, I would say. So that was for us a very big win in the end, especially because it happened early on and we could counter attack their negative argumentation. Another thing that helped us a lot in the discussion about health insurance is that I think almost 2 years before we started negotiating, we had communicated through other layers of the university politics, through the Comité de Santé et Sécurité au Travail, that this was an issue. And that all the classic questions, yeah, but these are international postdocs, can they not take insurance from their own country, et cetera, these were already passed by. So we had established in the years before that this was a real problem that needed a solution, and that solution could only come from their side. And that helped a lot during the negotiation. So we're mostly negotiating on the solution rather than on the terms of the solution, rather than on whether this was a problem, yes or no. For us, it helped that we had postdocs involved. It was not only me, but it was at least 4 other postdocs throughout those 2 years. And every time the other committee would bring up, oh, but this isn't a problem, or this is a good policy, there would be somebody able to discuss the impact of these policies on their personal life. And that made a big difference as well. And that would be actually an advice I would give to anybody that is preparing for negotiations, is start collecting examples of problems, with like real life problems, real life examples. Make sure you can back up your claims. It's really important. And for example, when we requested increased number of paid sick days, they said, yeah, but we looked into the system. Nobody is actually using the 7 days that they have already been given. And it turned out that most of the postdocs are not writing down these days in the internal system that we have. So that we stopped having that conversation, because indeed they had the data now to back up their own claim. So we are now working on informing people that they should use this system that is available to them, because it will help us in the next negotiations. And finally, I would like to say I thought it was a very interesting experience on a personal level. I hope people don't get nervous about a potential negative impact on their academic CV. I heard it in the previous, like in the, I think it was the first presenter received an award for his implication. I received one as well. So in the end, if you're able to keep this respectful, constructive, you can make a huge impact for your community. And I think in the end, the universities recognize that as well. So that was my presentation. I'll stop sharing and happy to answer questions at the end, or what is easier for the session right now.
That was great, Willem. Thank you for the awesome presentation. Now, are there any questions? Please unmute yourself, or you can enter them in the chat. There is one question from Andrew, Willem. Is there legislation or labor board in Quebec you could appeal to?
I'm just going to get, sorry, that was before you mentioned the mediation, which is, I think was fantastic. I think that was the best way to go. But I know in Alberta, other unions here, we have one labor relations board where we can appeal and complain to and say, like, look, if they're all about the university or the institution, the employer, it's bargaining in bad faith. And exactly. Then the relations board can say, either if they agree with you, then they can actually force the institution back to the table, or the employer back to the table, or face penalties. That's what I was just wondering. So the mediation is fantastic. I'm glad to hear that that worked out for you too.
Yeah, exactly. That definitely worked out. And yeah, our union is supported by the AFPC. I believe we'll have a presentation from this organization at the end. That were the person who joined us, Alain Lachapelle. He was absolutely wonderful, extremely knowledgeable, was there at the first negotiation. So had done many other in the past. So we were very much supported by his knowledge, I would say, and therefore also the knowledge of how things are organized in terms of law related to unions, etc. Yeah, thank you.
We really need that help. We need that expertise, right? So
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Or we can leave the rest of the questions for the end because we have 3 more speakers, and I will hand it back to Idris to introduce our next speaker.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks a lot, Willemike, for the presentation. It's wonderful to have our Francophone partners with us. We wish and we want to have more connections with our Francophone universities. We have been lucky at CAPS to be connected with Serum and Université de Montréal during at least in the past couple of years that I have the knowledge about CAPS. So this is wonderful, and we hope to have more partners from our Francophone institutions. So on that note, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker from McGill University, Dr. Farhad Maliki, the president of Association of Postdoctoral Fellows at McGill. Dr. Maliki, it's a pleasure to have you on board, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Idris, and hello, everyone. So first, let me share my screen. Hopefully you have, I have a few slides. Hopefully you have the screen at this point. Okay. So since I haven't been involved with the unionization and also the agreements, I'd like to focus on on this issue on a different scale and different point of view. So I want to start with this question: why should I be a postdoc? And I about this. I thought about this really a lot, and I think having any action regarding to our community for any planning, any action should somehow come back to this concept. So we might have a different reason, of course, and these are things that I come up with some of them, and I am sure there are many more reasons for someone to focus on. Reason like developing professional skills or academic skills or leadership potential, or benefiting from the mentorship of experienced researcher, and learning how to write grants and secure future funding, develop teaching skills, diversify research and developing a network of future collaborators. I like to focus on this one a lot because this is an important one, because my view is that we are not, I like to appreciate the point that Viamike brought up. We are not students and we should not be seen as a student. We should be seen as a future colleague. And that's really a big step that we should push for that, and we should really make that point highlighted in any way we can. Expanding publication record, developing supervisory skills, and I don't want to miss this one. Having time to refine your professional goal as a postdoc, this might be a good reason as well. So these are some reasons. And one thing that I want to focus that is the postdoc period is a transition, and the whole purpose of this a few years that you spend working on a research or project is to prepare for transition to the next step. And collective agreement is a step to meet the bare minimum requirement that make this transition as smooth as possible. I want to highlight this. It is not the ideal by no means, but it provides a minimum requirement, and we should go always beyond this. So these are things that I have been lucky as a graduate student and a postdoc. I have an environment that the standard is way beyond the minimums, but I have also been in contact with people that haven't been that lucky, and they really, meet them in the research environment. The minimum is usually the case. So how to go beyond this, beyond collective agreements? Once again, I want to appreciate the point that Viamike brought up. We might not have that much power, but we have a tremendous amount of soft power. So, and that is something that can help us to push for some of our programs. And build a supportive culture for postdocs, which not just try to meet the minimum requirements, but try to go above and beyond as much as possible. So we need to take actions. These actions might be in different angles. For example, one action, we can go with, if we are in a good communication among this association, we can come up with what is the minimum. What is the university that paid the minimum to a student or faculty, or postdocs? So that's a bargain that group or university with that amount of payment can come up with it. Of course, that should be normalized based on the province and states and city. But that's if a university is known, believe me, no university wants to be known as the minimum, as the worst case. And that's a bargaining power that we can use to push for a better agreement. The other thing is to try to recognize the success of postdocs. One thing that I have seen, and it is common really in academia, is that we don't get that much of appreciation for service. If we have people from associations and they work hard to push an agreement forward, to push a really action forward, we should try to make that visible. This could be, I like to suggest something for CAPS. Maybe we should have something, a national level hours for universities or groups that I don't want to say for university, for postdocs associations that really push for these collective agreements, try to come up with better outcome for members. That's something that, I mean, CAPS is the perfect place to appreciate that. Internally, within each association, I mean, locally, we can have, we come up with awards, really the first things in many associations that I have been member of is how we can come up with the money for those awards. Postdocs need recognition. We all know that we are in a transition system. If you come up with, if you have a mentorship award, that really might change the, change the chance of getting an invitation for being shortlisted for a faculty position, for example. And if possible, of course, always we try to, support these non-monetary awards with some gift that can be provided from different sponsors. But they don't cost that much, and it's a support for our university or members in the university. Among these are a few examples that we came up, and of course for each of them there are subcategories. But I want to highlight one category. This is for supervised. This is Supervised Excellence Award. This is not a in fact, a award for postdocs, but for the supervisor. And I really want to highlight this and encourage every group to really come up with this. We should appreciate and advertise for supervisors that provide that support and make postdoctoral period a period for growth. If we can acknowledge that and advertise that, once again, we kind of use as make a role model. All supervisors want to have such an award, but in order to get there, you need to support your postdocs, and that's the message you want to have with some of these awards. The other one, let me here to thank the CAPS for organizing events such as this one, and whatever the few next few days that we really have great educational programs, and those are really helping us to learn both challenges that we face and how other groups have came up with a way to succeed in dealing with these challenges. And one thing that I have been talking to Idris, of course, about this, and I think here I want to invite everyone as well, every association as well, is that many of our programs might be really general to many postdocs. So why not we come up with joint programs? And for these joint programs, we can push for having a better, in fact, outcome for our members. These are these were a few things that I like to suggest. However, I have a link that I like to share with you in the chat, and these are a few of questions that I wanna have a feedback from everyone. If you have a chance, I would appreciate it to provide a couple of questions regarding a couple of answers to these questions. How really make this information available to postdocs. This would be about some of the advice that you have for postdocs to go for a position or to not go for a position in a research group. We, again, the purpose is for empowering our members and postdocs in general by advertising, by showcasing these negative examples, and hopefully going for a environment which is supportive and goes way beyond collective agreements requirements. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Maliki, for the presentation and the fundamentals that we really need to understand. I mean, if we have a good understanding of who we are and what is our right, definitely we will have it much more successful, like the bargaining with the universities. But thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and the Google like the forms that you shared here. one thing that we really hope to do something collectively together, all the postdoctoral associations. This was a bit ambitious for me, but now I think that since we are all together, we have the connections and we have each other's like the information, it's really good to make it as a culture to work collectively and to be like the stronger like the community of postdocs in Canada. Since we are running out of time, same as what I said before, I will move forward with our next speakers, and I apologize from our speakers at UBC and PSAC because we are almost like 20 minutes late on their presentation. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Marcus Johns, the president of the UBC Postdoctoral Fellow Office at Vancouver campus, and also Dr. Barbara Oliveira, the president of the UBC PDFO at Okanagan campus. I'm not sure if Dr. Oliveira is here anymore, but I can see that Dr. Johns is here. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Idris. Before we start, I'd just like to say that I'm joining from the traditional, ancestral and unceded territory of the Musqueam peoples. Barbara is here. She managed to join in time, which is great. Do you have any presentation, Barbara, or shall I just share some slides?
You can go ahead with yours. I have just 2 slides.
Okay, cool. I'll quickly do not that one. Apologies. Too many options open. There we go. So, like many people have already said, well, I think I should start really by saying that UBC Vancouver has 2 different executive committees. The first represents the Vancouver campus, which I'm the president of, and Barbara represents the Okanagan campus. So I'll skip through that slide. Just want to say that I know many people have fairly small committees. We have a fairly large committee here with a number of VPs and 5 or 6 regular members at large, but with people transitioning, that number often changes. We represent around 1,000 postdocs on campus, although we probably reach maybe about 200 of them on a regular basis, and we probably have about 20 who actually regularly turn up to events. I'm going to skip over Okanagan as Barbara can talk about that. I think people are surprised when they hear that actually UBC doesn't have a collective agreement. We actually, I think through previous committees in previous years and actually having a postdoctoral fellows office and faculty members that advocate on our behalf are actually in a fairly strong position despite lacking a collective agreement. So as far as I understand, at least when I was firstly employed, there is a minimum pay of around $40,000 a year for a full-time position. And recently benefits were introduced provided that you meet a minimum 50% employment and have an employment that is more than 1 year in length. It's important to note at this point actually that the university also has a policy that postdocs who are joining the university have to have a minimum appointment of a year with potential further negotiations after that. We do separate awardees from direct employees, but awardees can receive benefits if they meet the minimum requirements set out above. And we do have a postdoctoral fellows policy, which sets out a number of agreements in there. I will have to admit that I only joined the university in October last year, so I'm still finding my feet. But I will say that having finished a postdoc in the UK prior to joining Canada, it is pretty surprising the differences here and perhaps how backwards Canadian universities are when it comes to appreciating postdocs. I think some of the common problems I'll highlight, which I think many of us have come across, despite being classified by as employees by HR within the university, if you look through the university literature, we're often lumped with the grad students. So that still is that issue of whether we are students or whether we're trainees or whether we're actually full-time staff. As I mentioned before, we do have a strong faculty representation on our behalf, it appears at least. I have been speaking to the research dean, who is currently trying to appoint an associate dean specifically for postdocs, which I think is pretty exciting. We have the same challenges in tracking our postdocs. We never know who's coming or going, trying to set up a way to perhaps be able to improve that. And again, the communication issues, we have no one who's here overtime to ensure that stuff that was previously come up is actually communicated to committees further down the line. This week, we're actually launching a financial security survey. I think part of this is trying to change how we talk to universities and to try and change how universities think about postdocs. I think part of that is trying to tap into the whole kind of equity and diversity side of things. So if we can show that postdocs are part of the leaky pipeline kind of concept, and that actually, if we're not providing postdocs with enough a suitable minimum salary, then we are actually in restricting who can actually become a full-time academic. That potentially is a way to then engage with the university and hopefully engage with the Tri-Council more. And we are going to include questions regarding unionization, whether people will be happy to have a fee and collective agreements in that. Yeah, so as I said, trying to change university thinking. I mean, I think a lot of the time I'm quite surprised that, again, coming from a European university, lack of pensions, pay into the Canadian pension scheme, but there's no matched funding from the university, which is perhaps surprising given that most of us are kind of in our mid-30s, and any kind of financial consultant would be like, oh, you should be paying into a pension, all of this. So I think there's definitely room for improvement there. So I will wrap up at that point and pass over to Barbara.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. I think there's not much for me there. We are falling under UBC Vancouver umbrella. I think the main difference would be that we are pretty small, and we still got Vancouver to cover our back for some things, but at the same time, we're fighting for other little things because we are small. So we have a better approach in university and in faculty. Our group is pretty small. Our postdocs are around 100 now, but as Marcus mentioned, we don't know how many go. We don't have an exact number. Our associate composed today of 3 postdocs, and we're trying to find people to join our executive team, but hard to get people to engage. But yeah, I think touched base on everything that we fall under.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Barbara and Marcus. Well, it's always great to hear from UBC. And as Marcus and Barbara said, there is no collective agreement there, but there are some good like infrastructures at UBC, but there's still there are the things that I think that there is a like the benefit of like the bargaining at any level that the postdocs are, regardless of what is the level of happiness. We believe that there is still a huge gap between postdocs and the junior faculty who join the universities, which should not be logically the case, but it is in terms of the salary, in terms of the benefits that they receive. And given that we are potentially like the future, like the faculty at different universities, it depends if we want to continue in this mode. But thank you once again to Dr. Jones and Dr. Oliveira. Without any pause, I will move forward to our last speaker, Dr. Celia Freitag from Public Service Alliance of Canada. We are very thankful to PSA Dr. Freitag to join us today. During the experience that I had at Dalhousie, I know that PSAC was full, and it is still to DPS and to like the postdocs and the research associates to make sure that the collective agreement is not necessarily only for postdocs, also for the research associate as well. So welcome, Dr. Freitag, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Idris. I'm not used to hearing the doctor anymore, so it's actually really fun. Thank you. My name is Celia. I am a research officer with PSAC. Before that, I was a postdoc though at Queen's University, and I was also on their bargaining team and mobilization, evil mastermind, probably. I was a huge pain to the university. It did work. We got a great deal with, we got childcare benefits for our postdocs, which was fantastic. We got a raise and access to a family doctor from day one, from starting your contract, rather than like 18 months after you leave, which was pretty much the case before, and unfortunately is the case in a lot of places still, because there are not that many family doctors. But anyway, after that, I was pretty happy to actually keep doing that rather than to do another postdoc. And I decided to actually work for PSAC full time. And my reasoning was that I could still help people, it's just in a different way, but I'm definitely helping postdocs. So I didn't hear all of the presentations because I was just in another meeting, but I'm happy that I actually picked the topic that I did pick to talk about. And that's mainly that negotiations don't happen in a vacuum. I could say that with confidence. We actually represent postdocs at 11 different universities in Canada. And so we do a lot of the postdoc negotiations, and especially myself, I'm assigned to a lot of the units. Participation by members, I'm sure anyone who's been in negotiations figured this out probably, is it's essential for getting a good contract, right? Employers, and by that I don't mean the PIs, I mean the university, they don't expect any of us to make noise or to run a campaign. So do both. If you want the employer to be motivated to actually improve your working conditions or pay you more, you do have to help them with that motivation. And one of the things that are important, that's important to remember, is that you do have lots of allies. So you have your own members at your local, and you have your affiliate union if you have one, for example, PSAC. You have other unions on campus. You have your faculty union, there could be TA unions, and all sorts of staff unions. You have those on campus. You have other postdoc unions across Canada and other unions, other postdoc organizations. For example, we're here with CAPS, and it's a fantastic organization just for postdocs. We have events like this meeting where you can network. We have allies in the community and at the university, social justice organizations, international postdoc organizations, parents groups, labor organizations, and more. And those are all bridges that you can continue building over time. It's not something that'll happen right away. Even faculty can be on your side. And that's something that comes up a lot. A lot of people are worried, oh, you know, you're going to ask for more stuff and it's going to fall back on my PI. They're going to end up spending more money. I don't want to do that. I don't want to cause conflict. But the key, I guess, to that is to make sure that you don't make the impression that you expect faculty to be responsible for improvements that you're trying to make. It should be the university supporting faculty members. So whenever there's communication of any type going out, make sure that that's very clear. You expect the employer, the university, to help pay for things, not each faculty member. And they are on your side, and make sure that they know this. And that should be an understanding. And it's, again, something to work on over time. The other thing is that you do need to start early. And this is something that I experienced myself when I first started at Queen's as the VP postdocs. They actually had to search high and low to find me, to actually get me to do this. And the reason was because postdocs were not involved. They were all doing their own thing. You know, postdoc, I actually talked to one, and there's another postdoc down the hall, 2 offices over. They didn't know they existed. That's how little they are actually talking to each other. So depending on your situation, you might have to start 18 months, 24 months before bargaining starts, just to actually start building up a relationship within postdocs. It's so important. And postdocs, the invisible posting, don't do that. It shouldn't happen anymore. We need to work on making postdocs more well known around campus and in the community. Make sure that they know each other. And every time I talk to a new postdoc union and we run a survey, it comes up that there's so much loneliness out there. There's depression, and people, it unfortunately even extends to partners. So that, like, by building that community, you're helping with that as well. And it's so important to support each other. So no more invisible postdocs, and you can figure out what works for your group. And it's a bit more complicated right now. I realize this whole in-person thing is not as easy anymore, but when we could do them, you could do meetups, barbecues, potlucks. You can still do coffee hours on Zoom, and you'll figure out what works for your group, and make sure to include union information when you can, and so that people know what kind of things you can offer. Another thing that I haven't heard, but this might have come up earlier, is grievances. If you're in a local and you have a collective agreement and you've never put one in, that's either everything is great in your local and in your collective agreement already, or you just haven't done it yet. And this comes into play later on during bargaining. Oftentimes members ask, can you improve our language? We need better language because we have whatever problem. It could be anything. And we end up asking them, oh, well, have you grieved this? How many times has this happened? Do you have any emails, any more information? And I would say 90 times the answer is no. We have no grievances, we have nothing. And you end up going into negotiate employer asking for better language, and they never even heard that there was a problem. And you can, it's obviously that's not going to get you very far if you can't prove that there's a problem, and it'll keep haunting you later on if you should go into mediation. If you can't show the mediator that there was a problem either, that is just not going to go very far. So make sure that if you have some kind of issue, or if you think there are issues, that you do that, at least bring it up to your joint union management committee if you're not willing to go grieving. Figure out, realistically, are the members in your unit willing to take Labor Act time? And probably an awkward thing for most locals to figure this out. But it's something that I think is important to kind of get an idea of before you go in. It helps you decide how much you want to actually ask for, if you have a big goal or a small goal. If you're trying to make gains that are new, like childcare benefits, it's not impossible. I'm not saying I know it's possible, we did it, but it was a lot of work. And if you know that your members will not go out, if they make it known that they won't go on strike, or are completely unwilling to even make it look like they might, then you have to know this before you will be disappointed. And I'm not saying that, as far as I know, there are no postdoc units that actually went on strike, but you sure as hell can make it look like you're willing to. And especially these days with the internet and Twitter and so on. And I'm happy to talk about this at some other time in a workshop or something, but you can definitely make it look like you're willing to go, but you need to figure this out. Part of that will actually require a budget. And again, it really depends on your situation, but it is planning again. If you have, if you're unionized already, you will have bylaws, you will have a budget, and you can have budget lines that will help you over time get a budget that you can put towards things like mobilizing. You can put it towards pizza for getting members out to meetings. You can put it towards your events, your meetings, things like posters, radio ads. We did some really fun ones. They're actually not very expensive to do at all, but they will require a budget. So planning ahead is a really, really big thing that you do want to do. The other really big thing that we don't think about is collecting stories from your members. If you're, again, we were trying to get childcare benefits. So one of the things we wanted to figure out is, A, do people actually want these in our unit, in our local? They did. And then B, do we have anyone in our local who's pregnant and worried about the future, and would this person be willing to talk to the media? Luckily, we had this fantastic person, and she actually ended up being on our bargaining committee. And here we were at like midnight after this person's due date. So she was due 2 weeks before. This was after the due date. We were with the conciliator, the mediator, talking to the employer about getting childcare benefits. And you know, she had just been on TV, the local news station, talking about childcare benefits. And the position that this put the employer into was definitely to our advantage. So it really does take a lot of planning, and it doesn't happen by accident. I guess that is my really big message today, is that you do need to plan ahead and take advantage of every possible thing you can. Someone said talking to politicians. Do talk to politicians. Federal grants are research grants. Talk to your MP. If you have an MPP or provincial member of parliament, they will be able to advocate for you for operational funds for the university that also end up supporting you. And again, relationships that are built over time, it is a lot of work, I won't lie. Hopefully there are resources within your membership. My big thing is I do graphic design on the side. So for me, it was pretty easy to look after that side of things. But there's lots of talent in each local, and please do draw from that. And with that, I will finish for now, but I'm definitely happy to take questions. And one thing, this came up right before a few times, you can put in your collective agreement that your employer could supply you the information about your membership. We managed to get it in my collective agreement for once a month. So every month the employer was required to send us a new spreadsheet of who joined and who left and the beginning. So you can put that in. So if you're in bargaining or going into bargaining, keep that in mind, that that is something you can ask for. And then you will never be in doubt again what your membership is like at any given time. Anyway, thank you so much. I would talk more, but I know we're restricted for time, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, Celia, for your talk. It's very interesting to learn the thoughts and the mindset of PSAC and the way that they are supporting our postdocs and our associations to build their own collective agreements. So, well, that's the end of the talks, and thank you very much to all the speakers. I know that again we are over the time, and I apologize for that. But this is the time to take the questions. I know that we somehow did that during the sessions, but if that is fine, we just leave it for 10 more minutes. If there is any questions, any specific questions that you want to ask our speakers or associations, we can do it. And then after that, we can wrap up the session. Is there any questions? If so, please, you can just raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask the question. And well, I can start with one. I was thinking myself that during this we obviously, like, the financial side of the collective agreement is always more bold. We want to see that how much is the salaries, the rights are protected in terms of like financially. But I'm wondering that to those like the negotiators or our associations are present in the session now, to what extent we bargain the well-being of our postdocs, as was touched by some of our speakers today, and to what extent if there is any conflict, there are some I would say unofficial, like the reports that they touch on the problems, like the well-being, the problems related to the well-being of postdocs. So to what extent you have included that in your like the bargaining, and what's the measure for that? I mean, if there is anything coming along, so how you have like I would say anticipated that in your collective agreement. Willem?
Yeah, so for us, as the health insurance was such a big deal, I think that item was even more underlined by the pandemic that arrived during the negotiations, to make sure that people have access to healthcare, right? And that everybody acknowledged that this was a problem at the moment of the negotiation. I do have to say that since that was such a big demand on our side, it left less room for other items. So I think when we prioritized the insurance, we could not prioritize as much the salary, for example. And when we were discussing the salary, we could only prioritize minimum wage. So so here, every time we had to go for the postdoc in our group that had the least benefits, I would say, and try to raise that. So I think a Canadian postdoc that's in our union that was already making more than the minimum salary, and that was already benefiting from the provincial plan, has had less of a bump from our new agreement than the postdoc that started at the minimum wage and that started without insurance. So here, this is when, to answer your question, to address the well-being, we could only address the well-being of the person who had it the worst, I would say.
Sure. And before moving to Celia, so when you negotiate the salaries, does it? I know that it's a minimum wage that you negotiate, and what about the promotion? Say that if you are postdocs for 2 years, is there any possibility to negotiate, say, a 4% like increase in the wage for the next year?
Yeah. So this was part of our discussions, definitely. So we discussed both just sort of a compensation for inflation, and on top of that, getting sometimes maybe a bonus for if your PI wanted to specifically reward particular good actions or such a thing. But this was again a trouble because that requires a standard increase in salary, which requires commitment from PIs, which the university wasn't always able to or willing to make. So while we were definitely on that path, we actually started out by saying we would like different brackets, and we would like the research years before being to count in how well somebody is being rewarded, but that didn't make it in the end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Celia?
Whoops, here I go. Yes, I agree. The health benefits is a fantastic step. Thank you so much for bringing that up, and congratulations. There's one other thing that if your postdocs don't have yet that you might also be able to negotiate for is inclusion in the employee assistance program if the university has one. And oftentimes it includes counseling and stuff like that. And a lot of the time, all the other employees have access to that and postdocs might not. So it doesn't cost the university that much. So that's something that you might be able to include in your contract next time around. And it won't take up that much, I guess, of the financial capital that might be going into your collective agreement. I have seen some collective agreements in the academic sector that also have a fund for mental health, wellness, that sort of thing. That might be something to go for as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And Andrew?
Yeah, thank you. And I was just going to join in that, you know, in one of our negotiations, in our negotiations, we went in fully and asked for a higher salary, fully realizing that it was not going to get approved. And that's their win. Like, okay, fine, we'll take this back, but then you've got to give us something else monetarily. The other one is that so in Alberta, again, kind of unique, every single union is either getting a pay freeze or rollback right now. In our contract, we made, there's no statement regarding like this is a freeze or this is where it has to be. Everything's a minimum and negotiable, particularly for salary, time off, and a few of those important things where it's like it can be up to your negotiation skills with you and your PI. So if a PI is, I mean, it pays for some people where, you know, some faculty members have a little bit more money, they're willing to say, yes, we're going to do this. But we did fight for the bare minimum on keeping everybody should not lose. Anybody that is part of PDAC, whether they get external money or not, should never, ever lose their health benefits, their maternity leave, or any benefits like that. So maternity, we did put a clause in. Some of the funding does provide maternity and parental leave benefits that you have to take. You have to take that one. You can't go to the university one if you're on an external funding. But there is, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It was a little bit of give and take. So, you know, we gave them salary. They gave us some of the maternity leave. We gave them back anyways. So, but yeah, definitely it's not unfortunate. We have to protect our lowest common denominator, right? And that's the biggest thing. And I think that's what every collective agreement should do. And looking forward, I mean, it's only going to benefit, and there's everybody moving, all other postdocs too, because if you protect your lowest, or the ones that aren't getting the best service, then everybody else will benefit from those policies as well. So that's just my comment, 2 cents.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Very thoughtful for sure. Is there any question from our audience?
I have a question, although I know Mohammed's written something in the chat as well about temporary residents and those legal issues. If anyone to comment about that, and then I can ask my question after that.
For sure. Mohammed, do you want to unmute and ask it, or are you prefer that I go ahead? Well, all right, I can go ahead. So thanks to all the speakers, informative interventions. I'm wondering, I have not heard relevant advice that addresses the postdocs who are dependent and facing tremendous issues such as legal and social services, health insurance, etc., while receiving low income and denied from having these issues. Is there anyone who wants to touch on this? I'm trying our best. We are doing our best to open up negotiations with immigration, refugees, and citizenship in Canada. So, for instance, one of the problems that we were hearing from our postdoc was that the closed work permit. We wanted to make sure that it would solve the issue when we have a good understanding of what's exactly going on. So some of them will be revealed through the national survey that we have done, so we understand what are the gaps and how we should and what we should negotiate. And the other part is some part is not really like clear for us. I mean, we received some problems about the closed work permit problem for the international postdocs, for instance. And we wanted to make sure that how many people they're dealing with this issue. And that's the very first thing. So we have to run some surveys, and you know that some of them is not really quick. So it's sometimes the work that it helps the future generation, unfortunately, not necessarily helping the people right away on the problem that they are dealing with. But those are the things that we are keeping in mind, and to try to improve that at CAPS. We have Villanic's hands raised.
Yeah, to think so. The reason that for us the insurance became such a big issue is because international postdocs reached out to the union and explained the challenges that they were having, and especially at the time of the first collective agreement, this oversight in, I would say, legislation, nobody was aware of it. So it needed to first come to the surface before we could find a solution. It's very unfortunate that it took years before it got there. But I would highly recommend, if you're facing specific issues as a postdoc, international postdoc, to address these with your union, with your postdoc association, so that it can be taken along in the next negotiation. And in addition, all these issues are very specific per university, per province, so it's difficult to address them here. But Edris, remind me, we will have a session this week about immigration. Do you know which day it is exactly, so we can communicate that here?
I think it's the last day on Friday, and yeah, before the award session. Yeah.
So that might be a good moment to join, because then this issue will be addressed a little bit more in detail, at least the immigration part.
very good point, Willem. So it's great that I mean, if the people touch base with us, let their unions, let their associations know that such a problem is going on. At least we can hear that. Sometimes it's not possible. Consider that the 6-7 associations that we have today are all like the members of U15 universities. So you have well-established disease. Still, we are dealing with some problems, and we want to improve what's already established there. But there are some small universities that are not members of like the U15, and still they do not have even association for their postdocs. So sometimes it's hard to hear from them, even though we have been trying to kind of knock the door of every university just to see that who are there and if they are interested to join us and talk with our committee, and then again do something collectively together. So it's really important to just be voice of yourself and your flows, and let the unions, associations, universities, or CAPS, or any people who are in the same like the situation know that what's going on, and we definitely have to think about the problems in further details. So is there any other questions? We have actually, yeah, Marcus.
Yeah, sorry, just a very quick one. So I think something that's come out of this is that, yeah, the Tri-Council is a major issue. And like, you know, the Banting Fellowship hasn't changed its award since 2010, at least, in how much it's giving. I mean, my tax has increased by $5,000 this year, since not having changed since 2010, but that's an increase of 9%, and inflation is at 16%, so it's nothing. And so I was just wondering how closely are other associations or unions working with their universities to put pressure on the Tri-Council to try and improve these kind of conditions?
I'll hop in. I don't think our universities are actually trying. They don't really care, right? I think it's up to postdoc associations and joining CAPS on a national vocal level to say, look it guys, like this is, your stipends haven't stayed the same. Like, you know, I mean, our university is keeping a minimum salary of 40,000 because it's the highest in the country, and it hasn't changed since 2013, right? Like, I mean, so I don't think that's the unfortunate part. And for me, with the Tri-Council, one of the biggest hurdles that it's come up multiple times is actually how the policy, their funding policy, that's what's killing postdocs and their ability to maintain their employee relationships. They consider it a stipend, and they're not allowing universities to deduct EI, CPP, or even pay benefits from it or whatever. I mean, universities pay benefits for us, but they don't get any EI or CPP. You're not an employee because it's considered a stipend and not a salary. And that's why we have categories. That's the only reason we have categories, is that the universities will not go against that because they're afraid of getting their federal PI funding pulled or yanked because they failed an audit. And this is where I think the only, if we could get the Tri-Council to make that change, then most external funding places will follow, and it'll be a huge benefit for every postdoc moving forward. I mean, there's other fundings. In my tax, for one, requires that the postdoc maintain and be an employee of the university, but it's just about how the money flows, and that's all it is. That's exact, and then having who they have to relate to. So I mean, sorry, I kind of hijacked the thread a little bit. I apologize, Marcus, but I think like universities, one, aren't looking at getting any more money. That's going to be up for PDAC. And two, they're not even looking out for the best interest of their postdocs by trying to negotiate and trying to get the federal or the Tri-Council to actually modify their policies to say, hey, at least in Alberta, we're going against provincial law right now by having these categories. We've got buy-in by one university, but we're, in my mind, they're going against provincial law because they're afraid to upset the Tri-Council. So I think that's where the biggest benefit at the Tri-Council level will stay in. Sorry, my rant.
No, just totally agree with that. I was just thinking how can we get universities on board with us so that we have pressure both from us and from the universities to try and deal with this.
I think it's the collegial and like collegial discussions and saying like, this is what's hurting talks. but we need your weight behind it, and whether you're willing to or not, then, or whether the universities are willing to or not, that's a whole other story. But I don't think the universities are going to go at it by themselves. Yeah.
Very true, very thoughtful for sure. I have one comment on this, but let's go with Celia and then Farhad. I saw their hands were raised. Celia, please.
Thank you. I completely agree. I did the talking to the MP thing, and they had no idea. This was in a university town. One of the biggest employers is the university. They had no idea what an postdoc was, what they did, how they were funded. Thankfully, they were an understanding. They were also absolutely horrified to find wages, and they ended up being very helpful. And we wrote a letter to, it was Mr. Duncan at the time. We wrote a letter, they hand delivered it to the minister and to a few of the other ones. So there are things that the MPs can do for you, but I wonder if we need to maybe think bigger and actually come up with a lobbying campaign and a kit that can be used for all the different MPs. This is thinking outside of my union stuff, just on a like greater postdoc scale, that information, especially now we're going to have all these new, if there were MPs that knew about it, they might be gone by now, like by the end of today. So maybe something going forward, that there is information that is easy to understand that we can use, whoever is doing the negotiating and whatever university you're at as a postdoc, is something that can continue to be used to help push for more federal funding. I mean, we didn't even get everything from the Naylor report, right? So it's not like the work is done. We need to keep pushing all the time.
And I think a national postdoc voice is
what
will draw it. I mean, that's thousands of highly trained, poorly paid people that MPs don't realize who they are or what they do.
No, they don't.
And so, yeah, I completely agree.
Has anyone tried even, like, I mean, I wonder even if you can, once it's safer again, invite them to one of the labs or a tour of some of the labs, or invite them to have coffee with 3 or 4 postdocs to learn and just to meet them. It's part of their job. They should know who the constituents are.
It is, but I think it's against rules, because typically universities are non-affiliated. They should not be affiliated. So if you like to bring in an MP or something from the outside into the university property, either one, you can get in really deep trouble if they get caught, if they find out, or you need the approval. But that's because, I think that's just the federal and provincial laws that are saying that they're non-affiliated, they're non-political. Like, you can do all your political stuff outside the university, but you can't bring people or any party onto the campus.
I've seen them on campus, though, for sure.
I'm sure they can.
For official
I'm saying,
things
like in Alberta,
I generally found them on campus for like funding announcements, and that's the place where you can meet them and chat them up.
Yeah, for sure. If they're on campus and they're invited onto campus, absolutely. But I don't think we as an association could invite them to campus without getting very significant trouble.
Yep, and lobbying rules are tightened up for sure. Good call. Yep, exactly. Good point. Thank you. Yep.
I completely agree with Andrew and Sylvia, and I think, in fact, I want to suggest something. Maybe we can start a signature campaign. I'm sure that we can get a huge national coverage from media as well, and that might really push forward. If CAPS want to start this, definitely we can reach out to all our members, and this is it's a pain that many of our members feel it. So I think we can do something without really hiring a official agency to do this campaigning for us. We can go with something like a signature campaign and get some media coverage, and that might really make this push this through.
I think a common letter, like I know the PIs have lobbied the government with an academic level letter to, accept most of the things that have been recommended in the Naylor report. And they had any academic could sign postdocs to grad students and everything. But if we could, I can't, I don't know who would write it. I'm not the most eloquent on writing these types of letters, but if there's a common letter that we could work on and agree on and draft, and then have signatories of hopefully we can get over a couple thousand postdocs across the country. I mean, that's probably only about 1 or 2% of postdocs, I'm thinking, but that's saying hey, look this is a huge number of us. I think that, and send that to an MP or a governor, well, Duncan was in it. I can't remember who's in it now, but the Minister of Education or funding, whatever, right? I think that would make a large impression, or even just the directors of the tri-councils.
Mm-hmm. We don't have the science position for the minister anymore, unfortunately.
That's right.
I do have her phone number still, though, so there's that. You can call her up. I think I would love to help with that. If I have to check, obviously, with my employer to make sure I am able to, but I can also check with PACC if they can help at all, because we do represent so many postdocs that hopefully we would be able to actually help with something. And I guess the other issue I wanted to bring up was that the women researchers were hit harder by the pandemic than other researchers, and that's something I'm interested in lobbying as well, to make sure that we can somehow get something in place to make that better. If it's, they already put in extended deadlines, for example, for applying for grants and stuff like that, but there's even cross-neutral things like that could be pushed.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, I'd like to suggest that this is not the issue only for current postdoc, but for future postdoc as well. Therefore, we have the support of many PhD students that are planning to be a postdoc. So I think we can get a huge number, not maybe more than $2,000 or $3,000. That's 1,000 people.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I wanted to add, I think that this is exactly the example of the work that I mean, that we have to work collectively together to make something. A CAPS is there, but again, one of the fact is we wanted to make sure that we have close connections with our postdoctoral associations first. And then if we can even make a plan for the rest of the year or next year, at least we get to meet each other virtually at least once a season or twice a year. That would be wonderful. We keep each other updated, and that's something that with the help of PSAC, we can move forward and do something meaningful. The fact is, in the meantime, CAPS started to kind of negotiate with Tri-Council. I absolutely agree with Marcus that Tri-Council has set the standard there. So the university never goes beyond that. And that's the problem. So we started negotiating with the Tri-Council, and actually there is a parallel session to this one is going on with Tri-Council with our colleagues at CAPS. So we have come up with a couple of proposals. One of them was about the stop the clock, to not necessarily the value is one thing, the length and the eligibility period is another thing, that after a certain time, with this competition that we can see in the market of the universities and the faculty positions, sometimes it's really hard for a postdoc after 2 or 3 years to find the job that he or she wants. So we want to make sure that they stop the clock, so there is no at least they extend the eligibility period for those postdocs who are getting more senior, but still they have the opportunities to apply for something. And the other one is about the salaries and the wages. They have unofficially said that they are gonna do it, so still waiting for it. So they said that it would be happening this year, hopefully. Again, nothing is official, so we are hoping that that would be a good step to start with. And still we are capped, so we want to be backed up with our associations to have the accurate data with the survey that we do. If we do the survey in each university and bring all together to make sure that, I mean, the data that we are presenting is something that it really makes them think about it. But I agree, the Tri-Council is a big I won't call it as the issue, but the big the entity that we need to make sure that this problem, which apparently they have done. And in addition to that, we started collaborating with Canadian Association of Graduate Studies. So CAC's situation is completely different from CAPS. They are perfectly supported by universities. And the university sees like the graduate studies of their own. But for the postdocs, it's a bit different because it's a very transition, like the position that we have. And at some point, we can see even the postdocs are receiving like the offer for 3 months or 6 months, which is quite surprising for us. So we are hoping that to have our seat at CACS and to kind of find a way to negotiate with universities too. That's one of the problems that we have. The universities, we are hoping that they endorse us. And so we have Tri-Council, we have universities. Tri-Council, we have to make sure that they endorse us. And then universities see Tri-Council, they endorse us. So it makes a way that we will have a stronger voice. So that's one of the things that we are doing. And we are hoping that it would help. Of course, we are in contact with CAPA, Canadian Association of Postdoctoral Administration. But I think the core and what we are looking for is exactly this one, is our own associations that we can talk easily. There is no like the pitfalls of saying something. We know what's our concern and what's the future of the postdoc. So we can easily just bring it up and come to a conclusion, or at least make the path like the opener for the future. So that is from our own like the end at CAPS, and we are hoping that at least there would be some changes with the negotiations that we have with Tri-Council. So is there any other questions? Oh yeah, Celia.
Yes, thank you. Are you also talking to research associate groups? I know you mentioned, sort of pre-postdoc, but I guess this would be like postdoc, because I find that fewer of them are unionized, so a lot of them have actually worse conditions as research associates than they did as postdocs. And if postdocs may or may not end up in that position, so I wonder if you have any contact or are there associations that would be appropriate?
I mean, we wish that we could have, but unfortunately, I think that there are lots of gaps for postdocs, and if they manage to solve it, it would kind of facilitate the negotiation for the research associates. We know that it's another problem, but I think that if we manage to solve this problem, the next would be much easier. But I for instance, I knew that like at Dalhousie, there was a wave that they started to build a collective agreement for research associates at the Dalhousie in Halifax. I'm not sure what happened to that one, but I know that it was a challenge. I know if it ended up with something or
well,
not.
University of Saskatchewan, they unionized the research associates, and they're getting included in the postdoc contract with, there are different sections, but it does happen because they are very similar in terms of funding and so on. So it makes sense.
Yeah. No, totally. Well, that's a good point that you raised. Thank you. And is there any other questions, comments? This session is wonderful. I mean, it never ends if you want to continue. And I apologize again, it's prolonged, but I think that it's really worth it. After a while, we are all like getting together, and this really is something that we wanted for the first day. And we think that was the best way to start the appreciation week, to make sure that we think about ourselves and we have each other back up. Yeah. All right. If there is nothing else, there is one last point that I wanted to mention, and you probably noticed that the former French name of our association was l'Association Canadienne des Stagiaires Postdoctoraux. But this stagiaire, the word stagiaire in French translated as student, intern, trainee. So we started to think about it at CAPS, and we ended up with just changing the name after receiving the votes from our Canadian, like the postdocs. And we changed the name to l'Association Canadienne des Postdoctorantes et Postdoctorants, which is ACPP. We think that this reflects our position and situation better than just being called as a trainee or intern or student, something like that. Even though it's just a name, but I think that it means a lot sometimes. So thanks to Willemike for leading that initiative, and our people at CAPS. And on that happy note, again, I wanted to, on behalf of our CAPS Executive Committee and the POL Working Group, Wanted to thank you all of the associations, postdoc associations in Canada, for delivering such important materials so that all of us can deepen our knowledge about what should we discuss as association and what are at some point, again, the pitfalls of the negotiations. I would like to thank all the presenters and participants who joined us from all across Canada. And we definitely know that the postdocs play a significant role in academic institutions in Canada and around the world, of course. And I sincerely hope that the outcome of this session helps us to protect the rights of the postdocs. So thank you very much, everyone, again. And I apologize again, we went over the time, but it was very interesting and exciting session for all of us. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing, most of you next days. We have interesting plans for the day 2, 3, 4, and 5 of our PAW 2021. Thank you, and have a good afternoon, everyone.